Hello, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Unfiltered with Nikki Dawson. And today I'm going to be talking about some real life scenarios with some of my clients and giving my 2 cents and some of the things that we have done to overcome some of their concerns. So, first things first, we are going to do a little. First things first, let's do a little recap of my week. So, I feel like I had the busiest weekend ever, and I seem to be booking a lot more in on the weekends that my husband is away. For a while there, I was really trying not to do so much. So, lately, I've been feeling a lot better and I want to spend time with my friends. So on the weekend, let's start off with Friday night. So on Friday night after work, I went out for a little drinky with some of my dietitian friends. So one of my good friends, Alice, and two other friends as well that we went to uni with. We met there, had a couple of drinks, and yeah, it was a really good night. We didn't have like a super late night, but on the way home, we got KFC because my friend Alice and we are definitely partial to a bit of KFC, and it was so good. When you've had a couple of wines, you just need something. And so we were like, drive through. And we literally only just made it in time. And then Saturday morning, I went to the farmer's market with my friend Claire, and it was so good. We went to the one on Manning Road, and so many cute little fruit and veg stalls. There was actually heaps and heaps of people there. We were talking to a lady that had like a tea stall, and we were like, wow, it is insanely busy, like first thing in the morning. And she said so many people come like literally on the dot when it opens so that they can get in, get all their fruit and veg, and then it dies off like a few hours in because there's not much left. And it must just be a lot of locals that do their little food shop there, all of their fresh produce. The line for the meat truck was so long. It was crazy, and I didn't get any meat, but it must be really, really nice produce that they have there because, yeah, people were lining up. And there was a lot of like gourmet, like sort of like food stalls and little bits and pieces, which we had a look at. But I just bought some really nice fruit and veg, and it was all really fresh. And I think it's going to become a regular thing that we go to the farmer's market. And I would much rather be spending my money there supporting small businesses rather than giving my money to somewhere like Coles or Woolworths. So I definitely will be going back. And yeah, it's just such a cute thing to be doing on a Saturday morning as well. I feel like you kind of start the weekend right. It's like so wholesome. So yeah, I think we will plan to go again next week. And what else did I do? Oh, then I went for a walk in South Perth. So I got my steps in, had some coffee with some of my other friends, and I didn't go to the gym on the Saturday, but what did I do? I cleaned the house, I did a bit of food prep, and I really don't like to do too much of a meal prep because I get so bored of eating the same thing. The week before, I thought, oh, I'll be really good and I'll prep my breakfast, and I prepped a couple of meals as well. Honestly, by the time I got to my fourth day of having the same breakfast, I was so over it. And it is something that I probably would eat multiple days in a row, but because it was already prepped, I was like, no, I'm off it, because it's exactly the same. So sometimes I like, say if I have my yogurt bowl, I'll have my yogurt, I'll have my granola, or I'll have oats, and I'll put fruit on it with some almonds and chia seeds. But I might not want to have the same fruit 4 days in a row, which is what I did for my meal prep. I might want to have a banana instead of having berries, or I might want to have some apple instead of the banana. I just don't know until the day. So I don't think that meal prepping is really for me. I prefer to prep the ingredients. So in my little food prep, I just chopped up all the mushrooms that I bought. I just chopped up a lot of the veggies that I bought. So I had zucchini, broccolini, mushrooms, and I chopped that all up. I also bought like a head of lettuce, which I washed and chopped up. And then some fruit as well. I got some strawberries, which I washed and chopped the tops off. And then some chicken breast. I cooked and I shredded the chicken breast. So, yeah, I much prefer that. And then it's been so easy to throw things together because all the veggies are ready to go. Like this morning for breakfast, I had mushrooms, broccolini with zucchini, and I chucked a handful of spinach in there. Had it with some eggs and a couple of tortillas. It was such a good breakfast. I did film that one, so hopefully I'll do some editing and I'll put that one out there very soon. On Saturday night, I went to dinner for one of my friend's birthdays. So she turned 40 and she is honestly the most gorgeous person ever. And she doesn't look 40. She looks amazing for her age. And she's just like the funniest person ever. I lived through her for some of her life experiences because she's just, honestly, she's just such a funny person. So that was a really good night. I had a glass of wine there. So I did actually drink 2 days in a row. It's not really like me to be doing that. It's not really something that I do that often, but it doesn't really bother me if I'm having a couple of wines on the weekend. But I only had one. And then on Sunday morning, I went for a nice coastal walk. I haven't been going for as many coastal walks lately because one of my friends is actually away at the moment and I usually would walk with them by the coast more frequently. Then I went to the gym and I also took my mum for a grocery shop and to visit one of her friends as well. So the friend that we went to go and visit was like auntie growing up. So I have known this lady for over 30 years since I was born. And she is also living with dementia as well. As you know, my mum is living with it too. And I would say that this lady is more forgetful than mum, especially in the short term. So it was really nice for them to catch up, but there was a lot of going around in circles because this lady, she did know who I was. She could remember me. And that's something that I noticed with my mum as well. Her long-term memory is very good. So she'll remember things from 20 years ago, but recent events, like say a few years ago, she doesn't really remember. So yeah, it was quite funny. This lady did ask me if I was married at least 5 times. It was quite cute. And then every time, yeah, I have a husband. And I showed her my wedding photos a couple of times as well. But it was very, very cute and so nice for my mum to reconnect as well. And it just made me really sad because this lady said to my mum, you should come and visit more often. Like I'm doing nothing. Like I've got nothing to do. And it really made me sad because the aging population, they really do lose a lot of their independence as well. So no longer driving, they can't do their grocery shopping anymore and they rely on other people. So I said to my mum and also this lady that we will come and visit more often, and we really will. I will be making time to take my mum over there because they need to keep social as well. Afterwards, I was a little bit emotionally drained because I'm a deep thinker, and I was thinking life is so short. I have really fond memories of going over to my auntie's house when we were younger and we would play in the backyard, and her and mum would be having conversations, and it was just very different. And now to see what they're like, and the conversation is very limited because of their cognitive impairments, and it just makes you realize you need to make the most of life, because you're not always going to be young. You're not always going to be independent. So we need to really spend less time worrying about the little things and enjoying life a lot more. And I guess when all of this happened to my mum, it really did put things into perspective for me, because I was losing the mum that I knew. But I just thought, I can't live my life like this anymore. I need to do what makes me happy. And I know that not everybody has the opportunity to do that, but I just changed a lot about my life. And I honestly can say I'm so much happier now. And to a certain extent, I am living the life that I want to be living, but we're never going to be perfect, are we? Okay. So, yeah, it just really puts things into perspective a lot. And then last night, I was so exhausted, as you can imagine, after that busy weekend. I sat on the couch and I watched a series. I watched all 3 episodes in the series, and I went to bed early. I really, really needed that. I think just like being physically and emotionally exhausted, I just needed to unwind a little bit and watch TV, which is a rarity for me. It's not something that I do very often. So yeah, that was a very long recap of my week/weekend. But yeah, the week ahead is looking good, working at the hospital tomorrow and going out to dinner with the girls tonight as well, my uni gals. So that will be very nice. And yeah, my husband's coming home on Wednesday night, so it'd be good to have him back as well. So something that I really wanted to talk about was some of the things that clients say to me in practice. And one thing somebody said to me last week was they feel like they know what to do. And honestly, she was really knowledgeable on food and nutrition, but applying that to what she was doing day to day was very difficult for her. And in private practice, before anybody comes in for their consultation, they will fill out a form and they do a bit of a diet history and a little bit about themselves. So they did their diet history, and for breakfast, they're having oats with yogurt and a bit of fruit. For lunch, they're having chicken, also brown rice and some salad. For dinners, they're having family dinners. Their husband likes to cook. So generally, it's some sort of protein with some veggies, maybe pasta on occasion, occasionally takeaway foods. And this person worked full time, has a young family. They were also training 5 days a week. And she mentioned that previously she was able to maintain her weight quite well. So on paper, she really looked like she was doing everything right. But as we went through a little bit more, I think if you just looked at what she had put down on her diet history, you'd think, great, nothing to change. Maybe we can look a little bit more at your portion sizes and go from there. But I did a little bit more of an in-depth assessment on her diet and looking at the frequency of some of the foods in her diet, also recipes of some of the foods that she's regularly having, especially for dinner as well. So there's a few more things that we can look at. when we started looking a little bit closer at the portions that she was having and the types of foods, that's when I started picking up a little bit of where the additional calories might be coming in. So her goal was to lose a little bit of weight. So we were looking at where additional calories were in her diet. And when it came down to things like breakfast, it was really portion control and the types of foods that she was having. So for breakfast, she was having a Greek yogurt. So I recommended to swap that out for a yogurt that was a little bit higher in protein and lower in fat, and continue on with the granola that she was having, but the recommended portion size, and adding a little bit more fruit in there as well. So that meal was a little bit more balanced because we added a bit more protein. We were reducing the portion size of the granola and also adding a bit more volume with the fruit as well. So she was going to keep a little bit fuller. And then when it came to lunch was actually a really good meal of the day. Sometimes she would have leftovers, so that's when we started looking at what her dinner meals were. And one that stood out in particular to me was a pasta dish that she was having once a week. So this pasta dish had a full container of thickened cream in there, and it was across about 5 or 6 servings. So I calculated the calories that were in each serving of just the cream alone, not including the additional protein and pasta that was going in there. And it was quite a substantial amount of calories that were in the cream. And because cream has quite a bit of fat in it, you don't really need a large volume for it to be high calorie. So this was one thing that I picked up on. So I just mentioned maybe we can halve the amount of cream and add in something else like light evaporated milk, or we could sub out the cream altogether and we can just use the light evaporated milk instead. So we didn't necessarily need to completely cut out the pasta. We just needed to change up the recipe a little bit. And I really love using light evaporated milk in place of cream, and also in place of coconut cream as well, because you're making it a lot lighter, which I actually do prefer as well. I'm not a huge fan of cream heavy pasta dishes because it can make me feel a little bit sick. So I think the light evaporated milk is a perfect substitute for that. And then when we were looking at the rest of the dish, we were just making sure we had enough protein in there and also moderating the serving size of pasta. And I did say to have a salad on the side or some additional veggies so that she was able to feel fuller. And there was also a couple of other dishes as well that were a little bit similar, but the pasta dish definitely stood out to me the most. And a few snackies here and there. So there was a protein bar that she was having regularly, and we put things into perspective with the protein bar. So it was quite small and it had the same amount of calories that she could have had eating a piece of fruit with some nuts and some edamame beans and some crackers. So she could have been eating a lot more food and nutritious food as well for the same amount of calories and protein. So we're sort of opting for that so that she isn't as snacky later on. There were at times when she was quite hungry and opting for sort of more sweet foods. Often when people are hungry in the afternoon, it tends to be the sweeter options that they're going for. And she was in a workplace where there was often like biscuits and chocolates around. So making sure that you're having snacks at work so you can have those more nutritious things, and then you won't feel like having these other foods that are there at work. So all in all, we're really aiming to improve the diet quality. So making sure that we're getting in enough protein, Also getting in enough dietary fiber and micronutrients from eating enough fruit and vegetables, and making sure that we're opting for carbohydrates that are rich in dietary fiber as well. So this was a really, really good example of why it often pays to see a health professional, because this client was quite switched on. And I did tell her that. I was like, you do know a lot, but sometimes it just takes somebody coming in with a fresh set of eyes, doing a thorough assessment to pick up on these little things. And I honestly, it was all of the little additions that were contributing to her increased calorie intake, and also going out to dinners on the weekend and having that extra glass of wine when she was socializing. So I'm not saying to stop all of this stuff, but I always say to people that are eating out on the weekends, make sure that you're still having your set meals and snacks, and then you can have that meal out. Because if you're skipping meals throughout the day and holding out for a dinner that night, you're not getting in enough protein, you're not getting in enough nutrition throughout the day. So I would always say breakfast, lunch, snacks, get it all in. And then you're less likely to overconsume when you are going out. I will die on this hill. I always say this to people. And I haven't seen this client again because I have been so fully booked in the clinic. So I had to book her in like a few weeks' time. And I'm very interested to see how she goes, because she is a highly motivated person, and I think she will definitely take on a lot of the recommendations that I've made. So I'm very keen to see how she goes. Okay, another one is a client that I had the other week, and she came in for weight loss. And often people will have an idea in their mind of how much they want to weigh. So say they weighed 65 kilos when they were 25 pre-kids, and they want to get back to that. Now they're 10 kilos heavier. I often will say to people, how did you feel when you were at that weight? And did you want to still look a certain way? And they will often say, yeah, I wasn't actually happy when I was that weight. So trying to really shift away from the idea of this certain number and focusing more on what you actually want to achieve. I would say most people just want to feel content. They want to be happy. They want to feel like they have some sort of control of their health. And in this, you can definitely control some things, like your health outcomes are definitely controlled by your lifestyle, and that includes diet and exercise. Some things we cannot control, like some disease processes, but we can definitely reduce the risk of some diseases if we are taking care of our health. And at the end of the day, for me, health is the biggest priority, absolute biggest priority. So I like to reframe with a lot of people, and especially when somebody is aiming to be a weight that they were over 10 years ago. Sometimes that is not realistic. And for the life that they're living, say, if you got to the weight that you were 10 years ago, potentially you would not feel your best, because you're a different person at that point in your life. So I would say focus on these other things first. The weight can definitely be in the background, but it's not your main priority, or it shouldn't be your main priority. So another thing that I hear clients say is they feel like they need to eat a lot less when they are trying to lose weight. And I would say this is not always the case, because it really depends on the type of food that you're eating and the calorie density of that food. So when we look at my favorite thing, a balanced diet. When we look at the calorie density of the macronutrients, they all contain different amount of calories per gram. So with protein and carbohydrates, we can eat a little bit more than fat if we're wanting to control our intake. When we look at the food groups, fruit, vegetables, protein, dairy and alternatives, and also grains as well, it really depends on what the components of those food groups are. So when we look at vegetables, there are starchy vegetables and there are non-starchy vegetables. So when we're looking at starchy vegetables, that is potatoes, sweet potato, pumpkin, those contain more carbohydrates. But when we look at things like beans, broccoli, cauliflower, zucchini, these foods are non-starchy. So they don't contain as many carbohydrates, but you're still getting the micronutrients in there. So all of your vitamins and minerals. And you can definitely eat a larger quantity of these non-starchy vegetables to feel a bit fuller. So if we were looking at a whole plate of zucchini and broccolini, that would be much less calories than a whole plate of potatoes because the amount of carbohydrates that are there. And I'm not saying that we're not going to include potatoes in our diet, but we're going to portion control them depending on what your goals are. So in that way, you definitely can eat a bit more food if we're opting for these. And same with fruits. So say, for example, apples, grapes, bananas have more carbohydrates in them than something like berries. So you can eat a bit more berries than those other fruits. So it's all about picking and choosing. And that's where nutrition knowledge comes into things. So it does pay to obtain the knowledge from somebody and to put those things into practice. We definitely still need to be eating enough protein to support our bodily function and support our muscle mass. If you are trying to lose weight, then increasing the amount of protein that you're having as well. When we're looking at the other food groups, dairy and alternatives, we would be looking at protein, so trying to opt for more protein-rich sources and making sure that there's enough calcium in there as well. So if you are having dairy alternatives, then opting for one with a bit more protein and making sure that there's calcium in there. When we're looking at the meat and alternatives group, protein, so if we're having something like tofu, opt for the firmer varieties of tofu because there is a bit more protein there. And then lastly, the grains group. Opt for things with a little bit more dietary fiber, so our whole grain or our wholemeal varieties, because these are going to keep you feeling fuller for longer. If we're looking at having a sandwich for lunch, opt for the wholemeal version, and you can pair that with a decent amount of veggies and also maybe some tuna. Perfect lunch. But often people will say, I can't eat bread because I'm trying to lose weight. But if you're having it with everything else, then it's actually quite a good balanced meal and you don't need to be cutting these things out. I would say when people feel the need to cut down on their intake and eat less food, it's because they are not eating the right foods. And you definitely can increase the amount of veggies and fruits. Like, I don't think that people realize the importance of getting in enough fruit and veg in the day. So definitely make sure that we're upping this, because otherwise you're going to be feeling super hungry and you are going to feel like you're on a diet because you're restricting so much. And then when it comes time to having the foods that are a bit more calorie dense, like say a bit of chocolate or something sweet or some potato chips, something like that, you will probably not eat as much of those foods because you're feeling satisfied with the volume of other foods that you've eaten. If you're having a decent amount of fruit and veggies, and if you're getting enough protein in as well, all of these are going to satisfy you a lot more, and potentially you won't even feel like having those other foods because you are feeling so satisfied from having more balanced meals and snacks as well. I would say that I do have a lot of people mention they feel like they're eating too much food when I do provide like the perfect meal plan, the perfect ideal day. But really, I do know how many calories are going into these meal plans. And yes, sometimes it is a big volume of food, but in terms of calorie density, it is not particularly calorie dense. When I write meal plans, and say, for example, like it's 1,800 calories, I'm spreading it between 3 meals, 2 snacks, and it is maybe a little bit more volume than what people are used to. Do you know how much is in a block of chocolate? In a full size block of chocolate, there is almost 1,000 calories. Some people I have met could easily have half a block of chocolate in a day, or sometimes even a full block of chocolate. Imagine that being half of your total calorie intake for the day. I know that it seems like it is a larger volume, but when you're eating less calorie dense foods, it is going to be easier for you to stick to a calorie deficit if you do have weight loss goals. Otherwise, if we're comparing whole foods like fruits and vegetables and whole grains to a block of chocolate, we know which one is more nutrient dense, which one has more vitamins and minerals in it. We do need to take that into consideration as well, and looking at overall diet quality. I would not write a meal plan that wasn't meeting the dietary guidelines, because I know we need to be getting in our micronutrients as well. There's my 2 cents. And I think once people understand that, then they may be a bit more accepting. Sometimes the volume of food does scare people a little bit, and I think when they have been at a point where they have been over-consuming a lot and been over-consuming on particular foods and seen weight gain, they don't want to go back there. So making sure that people are understanding that these foods are necessary when we're looking at promoting health and improving diet quality. Those are the couple of things that have come to mind when I think about my clients recently. There is so much more. I honestly could talk all day about these things. Thank you guys for listening to this episode, and I will be in your ears again very soon. Bye, guys.